But it's a great pleasure tonight for me to be able to introduce Mr. Thane Rosenbaum. I believe this is his 8th time here at Books and Books. His new work, How Sweet It Is, set in Miami Beach in 1972, Rosenbaum follows the Posner family, 2 Holocaust survivors, Sophie Jacob and their son Adam, doing everything they can to avoid one another in a city with an infinite supply of colorful diversions. In the style of E.L. Doctorow's Ragtime, How Sweet It Is populated and enriched by the presence of many historical characters of the day, including Jackie Gleason, Frank Sinatra, Muhammad Ali, Meyer Lansky, and Fidel Castro. Thane Rosenbaum is the author of the critically acclaimed novels The Golems of Gotham, Secondhand Smoke, and the novel and stories Elijah Visible, which received the Edward Lewis Wallant Award for the Best Book of Jewish American Fiction. His articles, reviews, and essays appear frequently in many national publications, including the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and the Huffington Post, among many other national publications. He's a senior fellow at New York University School of Law, where he directs the Forum on Law, Culture, and Society. Indeed, my great pleasure. Please welcome back Thane Rosenbaum.
Beach High Homecoming. And in case you didn't believe that, we all even brought the Beach High cheerleaders. Janie Berkowitz is here, Nancy Fried. I'm going maiden names today, old school. Janie Berkowitz, Nancy Friedman, Corey Rafi, Barbara Brooks, Barbara Feshbach, and the captain of the cheerleaders in 1977, just for added emphasis. And Beach High. So there's 5 Beach High cheerleaders. And the key thing, there's a secret, Ponce de Leon blessed our cheerleaders because they look exactly the same. I don't know how the hell that happened. They look. So thank you all for coming. This was very much an overwhelming and unexpected surprise to have that much of a support. And frankly, Mark Zuckerberg should hear about this. Because this is the exhibit A of a successful Facebook experience, right? If you if you don't own the stock, whatever. Just saying, this was a very successful. This probably could not have happened, and it was very lovely to read along people's responses, trying to remember this, as the Miami Herald reported today, this Valentine to Miami Beach. That is How Sweet It Is. It is a homecoming for me, cheerleaders and all. In fact, this is my 8th visit. And in fact, when my first book came out, it was at a different store down the block. And many of you were here, which is unbelievable to me. Definitely Kenny was here, and Judy was here, and the Kovlers. And my daughter, one of my daughters, there are 2 of them here, one of whom was in a Snuggly, and now now she's 20. So that just proves I've been working this thing for 20 years, this career. And now she's actually walking around without a Bjorn, baby Bjorn. I think it's important to acknowledge at this point, and I'm sorry about the ruse, but there really is no book. This is a beautiful cover. It's just words. They're not even sentences. It was an excuse to bring us all back together, and it really worked. It really worked. So thank you. It was also an excuse to give Bubba Cohen an opportunity to launch his campaign for Congress right here. Has anyone been following Bubba Cohen on Facebook? Let me just say something about him. Israel has no greater defender. And forget Congress. If this guy was Minister of Defense in Netanyahu's cabinet, Hamas would just give up rockets, leave Gaza. So, why don't we have stand up? Yeah, Bubba Cohen, who should, who or. I got this many applause. I got more mitts. And as Bubba has already announced, Bubba arranged for there to be a little reception afterward, and Brett, of course, and some of the others. So please join us during the book signing in the other room, so we don't have to run off at the end. It may not appear this way, but I am unbelievably nervous. You know, I do this for 20 years. I do this all over the country, Germany, the UK, Israel, Australia. I went to Australia to do stuff. And it's only here. I'm so fucking nervous. I mean, it really, yeah, and it obviously, you know, returning to the scene, you know, the ancestral home. I can tell you, I confided, I'm not kidding, I confided with Barbara Feshbach on this, Barbara Brooks, Marty Bards, and I called people telling him, I'm freaking out. Let me just tell you, and it's weird because, you know, I do this all over the country. Like, for instance, in Des Moines, Iowa, I kill. I mean, unbelievable. Like, if I'm in Des Moines, I'm funny and smart, and I read right and intelligent, articulate. I'm good looking in Des Moines. I'm tall, oddly taller in Des Moines. And here, this is my 8th time, honestly, especially among all these friends. I feel like that putz in 3rd grade who was in Mrs. Mooney's class in Biscayne Elementary. Yay! The same putz. Actually, I think Saul Simbler was in that class, and so is Gary Rosenberg. So that's unbelievable that they know Mrs. Mooney, and they knew that I was a putz in 3rd grade. Can I ask you all, before I start this very short reading, and then we'll, you know, this night is really for all of us. I'm going to do a very short reading so we can, you know, have our own reflections and recollections, and you can ask questions. So, but before I do, can I just, you know, ask you a favor, if possible? I did travel down with my longtime partner, Rosalind Myers, and I have 2 daughters here. If you can, thank you, Basha Tess and Elska are here. If you can, for the love of God, not embarrass me.
Can't do it.
I know, Barbara, here she said, Barbara, sorry, no dice. If you can resist, nothing about hickeys or wedgies or acne or striking out at the plate or striking out with girls, which Lord knows there was a lot of that. If you can, because, you know, in Harlem, where I live, it's like Des Moines, you know, and they don't exactly know the truth. This is indeed a Valentine to the experience of living in Miami Beach in 1972. For those of us who were only 12, I mean, you know, it was hard to understand what an epic, epochal year it was in American history, in American culture. It was the rise of the counterculture, the very much the counter-war, anti-war Vietnam protesters were in full swing. There were protests throughout college campuses around the country. There was the whole new beginnings of the sexual revolution. And of course, Miami Beach hosted both the Democratic and the Republican conventions. A little tiny town able to pull that off, sort of remarkable when we think back on it. Watergate took place in '72, just a number of weeks really before the Democratic convention, just to get some sense of historical context. The Jewish mafia was here, but they were in decline. The hotels were in decline. The Cubans were finally sort of newly re-energized, partly because I think they realized Castro wasn't going anywhere at that point, and the Jewish mafia resented the loss of their hotels. And so there was just an incredible amount of energy and an incredible amount of history here, very important history, and it was all happening around us. This book tries to get, but more importantly, there were these amazing, epic, gigantic characters that lived here, like Jackie Gleason, and Frank Sinatra was here during that time, and Sammy Davis Jr. was here, and Muhammad Ali spent a lot of time in 1972. Meyer Lansky, of course, had just been extradited back to the Miami from Israel. And of course, the conventions, and this was all happening while we were here, a small town for them. And so that was the conceit for How Sweet It Is, to sort of revisit that epic year, a time of social upheaval and political unrest, and to do it in the context of this family that I resurrected after 20 years. My first book, Elijah Visible, featured the Posners. I brought the Posners back 20 years later because I wasn't done with them, and I put them in this sort of orbit of this exciting time. So I'm going to do a very short reading, but I have to warn you about something else. This piece, it's dirty. It's blue. Like I'm like vaudeville here. This is I'm like, some of you, really? No kidding. No, it's filthy. I know. So and let me tell you, this is so filthy. Like, it's good my parents are dead. Honestly, this is unbecoming of a Jewish boy, even from Miami Beach. But it's important to provide the warning that what you're hearing is filthy. If you can't handle it, take a walk and come back. You can get some frozen yogurt. It's on me. I just want you to know, look, I grew up here. I'm a degenerate. So my parents are not here, thankfully. But what I'm worried about is the Kovlers are here. And they have served as surrogate parents for decades, and I think they're going to be pissed off. All right. Yeah. Check out Bert's face. All right, so this is a small scene. The setup is actually quite easy. Two boys, Adam and Brad, have a Little League baseball game at Flamingo Park the next morning, very early, as they used to have, because it was so hot in Florida. The games were very, very early. And they try to get out of it by coming up with this scheme to flood the Flamingo Park field the night before at midnight with the hoses. And that way the field would be unplayable, and everybody would think it was a summer tropical rainstorm, which is what happens all the time. But on this particular day, these two 12-year-olds show up at midnight to flood the field. Something very mysterious happens to them that they start to see in the outfield. And this is, the chapter is entitled The Flower Power of Flamingo Park. And this is from, it's from How Sweet It Is. Those strange noises of the night had little to do with baseball. No thumps and claps of balls smacking inside smooth leather could be heard. Instead came the sounds of bodies pounding against and riding on top of one another. Soft moans escaped from the mouths of bodies in recline. As the boys inched closer, almost holding hands, they saw other hands being held on the grass, fingers intertwined, in some cases clenched tightly. While barely visible, these players were without uniforms, without clothes at all. Nothing but bare skin. The entire outfield was littered with condoms and covered in coitus. Adam and Brad's fears waned as their tiny dicks stiffened. Come on, you can laugh at this. You're from Miami Beach. I know it's on live stream, but no one expects anything of you. You're in South Beach. Do it. There's fucking in Flamingo Park? Brad wondered aloud in a whisper, not wishing to disturb the party. Nothing to fear. All this bawling in the outfield of Flamingo Park was going into extra innings. A hailstorm of snowballs couldn't cool this place down. I can't believe it, Adam said. Is it like this every night? Why didn't I think of this before? Yeah, we're in the big leagues now, Brad noted correctly. This was very much an adult game, and true little leaguers were in the best position to know. Bodies were everywhere, taking up every inch of grass on top of sleeping bags and picnic blankets. The boys were still a year away from studying geometry, and this was a master class with legs and arms locked in right angles, diameters measured by lining up diaphragms. Silhouettes were lit softly under the moon like candles melting into one another. The sexual revolution had come to Miami Beach in the guise of soft porn, and it appeared to be making its debut in Flamingo Park, which could now add yet another physical activity to its inventory of sports offerings. Stop drooling, Adam said, and then swatted Brad in the face with his baseball cap. Hey, I don't see you looking the other way, Brad sulked. Besides, no one seems to mind that we're here. Adam observed the same thing. I think they like it, he said. Thank God. I can't wait to tell the rest of the team. An earthy flower child with long strawberry blonde hair and blanketed her small breasts and legs that shimmied in the grass smiled at the boys and motioned for them to walk over. Brad suddenly felt the need to pee. While Adam took 2 steps backward and tripped over a fornicating couple who weren't even there a moment ago. Sorry, he said. Excuse me. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't let me stop you. Love means never having to say you're sorry, giggled the girl who was sitting on top of her partner's penis. Adam cocked his head counterclockwise as if to reorient the bodies to their proper positions. Such a strange intersection, he thought, where a man and a woman were arranged like a centaur. All this heat, but this time it had little to do with the mercury reading. I don't get it, Brad said, as his eyes found a threesome, and suddenly he could no longer count. Blinking, he nearly passed out, as if he just overdosed on the wettest of all dreams. Neither he nor Adam had received much in the way of sex education at school, and now it appeared that they had skipped a few grades. Sex was never mentioned at home, nor, he doubted, was it ever performed there. Even rudimentary biology would have leapfrogged over material better suited to Hustler than a page from the Birds and Bees playbook. There's got to be a sign somewhere saying that fucking in the park is not allowed, Brad said. Not that he was looking for one. Yet no such sign existed. It wouldn't have made much of a difference even if it had. In that muggy and moonlit July night, nothing could have dampened these acts of openly free and promiscuous love. This was the age of Aquarius, where no one seemed to age. Modesty was so middle class. Constraints on personal freedom, measured by hair length and hemlines, were to be ignored. The body could be painted or remain unclothed. All invitations for sexual pleasure were welcome and expected. Erections were like greeting cards. Wet loins made pickup lines obsolete. Miami Beach had become one big brothel, and Flamingo Park was now a nude beach at night. What's going on here? Adam said. Is this a secret? Maybe Disney World has come to Miami Beach, Brad wondered, which was not so far-fetched. The Magic Kingdom was still new to Florida, less than a year in existence. At the time, very few people on Miami Beach knew precisely where Orlando even was. This isn't Disney World, Adam surmised. They don't have these kinds of rides. I think it has something to do with the conventions this summer. Everybody's talking about the election. Yeah, but they should be talking about all these erections. Adam was right. Miami Beach had been a convention hotspot for many years now. Unions, teachers, the AMA, the ABA, the chiropractors, the dentists, the Shriners, all made Miami Beach a winter destination for their annual meetings. Aside from the sun and surf, Miami Beach had posh hotels with nightly entertainment and swinging singles wanting a fling with married doctors, lawyers, or teamsters for that matter. The humid air was pregnant with hedonism. The city had every vice in a vice grip. The Jewish mafia ran the action and gave the city its racy, risque allure. Wife swapping and key parties took place around casual drug use. Most of its residents didn't pay much attention or partake in the fun, but tourists knew how attending a convention down in Miami Beach was a terrific way to break with convention. Both the Democrat and Republican parties were holding their presidential nominating conventions on Miami Beach that summer. And with Nixon ramping up America's involvement in Vietnam, swarms of anti-war protesters descended on their quiet city. The yippies and the hippies, the flower children with their tie-dye shirts, body paint, jean jackets patched with peace signs, LSD, and drugs that can't be bought over the counter, but do take you to a place out of your head. The booze that Jackie Gleason swilled all over the city was suddenly, in this climate of tuned-out, plastered unconsciousness, nothing but a soft drink. War protesters were the new greasers without the white T-shirts and hair gel. Hair, long, knotted, braided, and unwashed, was but one of their calling cards. They favored Camus over Couriac. Politics was their theater, and the 60s their stage. Impassioned beliefs were delivered like tantrums. This is what Jackie Gleason, the great one, had to say about the rock music of those times. That music! Don't get me started, but let's not confuse loud with tuneful. Music to your ears isn't supposed to break them and make you go deaf. I don't care what anyone says. You can't dance to noise. And everyone knows that I'm a great dancer. People are always surprised when a fat guy is light on his feet. It produces the same kind of disbelief and delight as a bear riding a unicycle. But what these kids do, spinning around in a circle, flapping their arms and looking up at the sky and as high as a kite, that's not dancing. It's a seance that's gotten way out of control. And I have nothing against loud clothing either. Look over there, my orchestra leader, Sammy Spear. He wears brightly colorful suits that look like a Peter Max painting. But at least he's wearing a suit and tie. And my orchestra is playing real music. Gleason was among those on Miami Beach who could do without the flower children with their public nudity, pubic hair, pot brownies, contempt for authority, and pungent bodily odors. The great one was of a different era, one of stiff drinks and even stiffer tuxedos. He liked Miami Beach the way it was, quiet and mindless during the day, louche and sordid after dark. The excitement of social upheavals and revolutionary change meant nothing to him. This was due to a healthy skepticism of the political process. Such are the prerogatives of kings. All right, I'm going to have to gotta take my glasses off to get this right. All right, ready? Can you see me? All right, all right. Hardy, har, har. All right. That was the best. That was the best, and you don't get. They don't charge extra for that. You want to know what I think about the conventions? He joked with fingers curled into his best uppercut pose. You really want to know what I think about the conventions? He hesitated mockingly. I'll tell you what I think about the conventions. Pow, zoom, right into kisser to both the Democrats and the Republicans. During these scattered reservations, the presidential conventions were going to be a big deal for Miami Beach. Jimmy Stewart, Sammy Davis Jr., and even Frank Sinatra were expected at the Republican convention to support their man, Richard Nixon. Whenever Sammy Davis Jr. came to town, Jackie Gleason let loose on that little black Jew who loves Miami Beach because it's like homecoming for him, surrounded by all these short Hebrews. Let me just say this. The candy man likes his black-eyed peas in his cholent, if you know what I mean. I'm going to do that again because that was better and I blew it. That deserved a better reading. Let me just say this. Let's pretend you didn't hear it the first time. The candy man likes his black-eyed peas in his cholent, if you know what I mean. Yeah. He's playing on both teams and he's married to a white woman. America wasn't ready for that, especially in the South. The eyes of the world were about to settle on this otherwise forgettable peninsula in the sun. The whole world was about to come on down to Miami Beach. It might have been too much pressure for such a pipsqueak city. The summer of '72 was going to be a scorcher for many different reasons. The world had many, many questions. Were people supposed to turn on, tune in, or drop out? Was America going to stay in Vietnam or get out? Will race relations improve or get worse? Will a country founded on the ideals of family, honor, and virtue be remembered only for pot-smoking, bra-burning, and wife-swapping? Everyone around the world knew that despite all the superpower bluster, America was in the toilet, and Florida was the very last sewer system before it all washed out into the ocean. After all, the entire state was shaped like something that only a plumber would carry around. The convention would be watched on televisions around the world. The hotels along Collins Avenue were going to be jam-packed with suit-wearing delegates from the left and the right, the donkeys, the elephants, the Dixiecrats, the libertarians, all learning to observe Miami's summer heat advisories, which for natives is as simple as staying indoors surrounded by the Arctic blast of central air conditioning. Sultry Miami may be Miami Beach's sweet spot, but it's also their very own 10th circle of hell, where Satan is sitting atop a palm tree handing out bottles of Coppertone. The delegates were destined to return to their states feeling burned by their experience on Miami Beach. For the Democrats, the convention was set to take place in late July. The Republicans were going to kick off theirs on August 21st. President Nixon was running for re-election. Bombs were exploding in Cambodia. There were anti-war protests at colleges across the country. Bras and draft cards were being burned in public. Psychedelic drugs were producing a generation of psychotics. And the musical Hair had just closed after a 4-year Broadway run. This feverish radicalizing of America was just getting started in Miami Beach, however. Men were showing more hair and the women exposing more cleavage. Polyester patterns merged into one another like Japanese kites on Collins Avenue. Peace medallions swung from sunburned necks, replacing Stars of David. American culture was being countered at every turn. As if to pause from all the mayhem, both political parties decided to travel down to Miami Beach to nominate their party's candidate for President of the United States. But all the cynicism and degeneracy would follow them down to this beachside enclave. The summer of love a few years earlier had missed Miami Beach, but now it was making up for lost time. The city was about to experience a summer of radical politics and reckless free love. Its Little League baseball games were now only the sideshow. The main act was an invading army of hippies camped out in Flamingo Park, an ominous Greek chorus in the political theater of American pomp. The city that had embraced snowbirds, retirees, Holocaust survivors, and Cuban refugees was about to take on a new foreign presence. Delegates from voting districts across the country descended on Miami Beach like electoral locusts. The secret to Miami Beach's magic was out. The insularity of this tropical hideaway was being overtaken by party delegates and members of the student body. These two groups had little in common other than a shared summer in Miami Beach. The delegates dreamed of the electoral college. The students were largely college radicals and dropouts. Both groups had their junkies, although they got high on different things. Amid all the caucuses and backroom deals, there was also carnality. In addition to the trysts and tryouts taking place after hours at the hotels along Collins Avenue, Flamingo Park became Miami Beach's answer to Peyton Place, with a whiff of Plato's Retreat. That's where the anti-establishment protesters made their beds, right there on the grass, breathing in the humid air and kissed goodnight by the moon hanging over Miami. Surrounded by groping hands, writhing bodies, and the multiple orgasms of college co-eds who were less than a decade older than they were, Adam and Brad contemplated their good fortune. And just think, had Adam not minded getting up early to pitch in this very park, they would have missed everything. Will this be going on all summer? Brad said with bedazzled, bloodshot eyes. The field manual being used on this field could have been written by Linda Lovelace. Deep Throat had only just premiered in New York a month before the Democratic Convention, and so much of the film's central plot was being rehearsed repeatedly in the outfield of Flamingo Park. Thank you. These are just protesters against the Democratic Convention, Adam said, wide-eyed and knowing. Will the Republican protesters be fucking outside next month? Brad asked anxiously. I sure hope so. I bet there's going to even be more fucking in August for the Republicans, Adam predicted. They all hate President Nixon, and they think he's fucking up the country. Thank God for Republicans, Brad said. Orgies for everyone. That's my platform. I wish I was old enough to vote. A couple that had just finished copulating noticed shamelessly that they had been observed by two young boys. The male had a gruff beard, a helmet of curled hair, and the stick frame of a graduate student who lived off granola. His female partner had long and straight blonde hair, a stocky build and sizable breasts. Her ankles and wrists were ringed with bangles the color of coral. You here to watch us having sex or to protest the convention? The young activist asked Brad and Adam. The boys were silent and then stared at one another as if this was a trick question. You both deaf? He waited for his answer. By the look of you two, I guess civil disobedience is getting younger and younger nowadays. Don't be ridiculous, Sheldon, the girl answered for the boys. They're just here to watch us screw. They're not political, just look at them. The only hard positions they are taking involve whacking off, if they are even old enough to do that. Adam and Brad felt uneasy, not sure whether they had just been insulted. A ray of light from a kerosene lamp in the background illuminated the girl's face, which was sunburned from the limelight of her daily demonstrations. Actually, Brad said, hesitatingly, truthfully, we came here to flood the baseball field back there. He pointed behind him without removing his eyes from the still naked girl. You here because of baseball? The girl laughed. She had obviously forgotten that she and her lover had rounded the bases repeatedly that night. Our Little League team is supposed to play here tomorrow morning, Adam continued, and we wanted to make sure the field was unplayable so we could sleep late. You buying any of this? The young man asked. If it's true, then it's really cute, she replied. Otherwise, they're just a couple of perverted peeping toms. Or budding radicals, her lover refused to give up, the ferment of protest always top of mind. Giving the finger to their baseball coach, refusing to play by the system's rules, coming here at night like the Weather Underground. Rock on! The young activist was having another orgasm, this time without the assistance of his companion. Oh, please, Sheldon, the girl interrupted. Leave them alone. Hey, I have an idea. Come skinny dipping with us. These kids are way underage, April. What, you're afraid of getting arrested? The girl said defiantly. We came here to get arrested. Yeah, but not for this. From a different direction, someone shouted, Hey, kids, you want to smoke a joint? A stoner wearing a distressed army jacket and sporting a Fu Manchu mustache laughed himself silly. Flamingo Park is now occupied by the power of the flower child, April exulted. All the old rules don't apply here. This is our place, our park, and we have nude swimming every day, every midnight at the Flamingo Park pool. The soul of the New Left was sustained by aimless love and midnight swims. Radical politics required such erotic respites in those days. Okay, you two, off with the pants and let's see your peckers, the young man said. We're going skinny dipping. Adam and Brad looked at one another, took another glance at the girl, lifted their shoulders, and dropped their gym shorts and underwear down to their Converse sneakers. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know how blue that was, but it was blue for this city. The good news is that's by far the dirtiest thing. Nothing else is like this. And I don't know if I read or misread the crowd, but I just couldn't help when Brett Feeder mentioned in a post that he remembered. What did you say you remembered?
I remember I went to the...
You were 12.
I was 12 in 72, and I went to Flamingo Park, which is where I grew up. I played Little League there. Kenny and I played on a 75-pound football team on the field there. I think I could be the whole backfield now. And
You saw your first naked girl?
I did. My first.
So when I heard
That was not my relative.
when he mentioned that a few days ago, I said, in honor of that observation, let's do the orgy scene of How Sweet It Is. All right. For those of you who don't know, because the truth was many of us were only 12 years old at the time, that happened. That was Flamingo Park. Rocky Pomerantz had a brilliant idea. Rocky Pomerantz, this is 4 years after the Democratic Convention and the rioting in Chicago, and that's in the book. Rocky Pomerantz is one of the main characters in the book. But he actually had, and this is, some of the stuff is fictional, some is actual, but that's actual. Rocky Pomerantz actually met with Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin. I fictionalized the meeting, but there was such a meeting. I do it funnier here, but they actually had a meeting in which they threatened to march naked down Collins Avenue. I mean, they threatened all sorts of things. And Rocky Pomerantz basically, it was amazing because after the rioting 4 years earlier in Chicago, nobody believed that the Miami Beach Police Department could keep the peace. Nobody. But 4 years later, the war was still raging in Vietnam. There was much more college protest. There was no way there wasn't going to be ugly stuff for Walter Cronkite to show on the news. And Pomerantz was very much a hero. He said, no, we're never going to have any of that stuff. And he came up with some brilliant ideas, and one of which was to offer them the park. And he cut a deal. He said, look, the park is yours. You can sleep there. You can smoke pot there. You can do anything there. But you can't hassle delegates. Just go to the park and use it. You can have sex. And I'll leave the pool open at night because you don't have air conditioning. You can go skinny dipping. And he said, He gave them everything, and then undercover cops actually lived among them just to make sure that nobody did. But they actually did send a few undercover cops on a site. It was a good assignment. There's one actually funny anecdote about a state legislator who walked through the park, and he was the only guy wearing like a suit, and he was carrying a pipe, and some protesters said, "Hey man, what's in the pipe?" And he said, "The usual thing." But the park became a playground. Then he also built a podium for them on 17th Street, but much further west of the convention center. So you go on stage and you can scream about Nixon all you want, but you can't go to the Fontainebleau and hassle people. And that was really brilliant. And it really worked. There were very few. There were some more, obviously you could imagine, there were more protesters there for the Republicans and the Democrats. But there were very few arrests. And there was nothing like Chicago with cops beating on the heads of kids. And that is an actual story. And that whole chapter plays itself. There's even Watergate is in that chapter because Miami Beach has a little Watergate piece too, because the break into the Watergate complex was only a few months, less than 2 months before the Democratic Convention. People forget that the plumbers were looking to do it again here at the Octagon Hotel, which is, where the hell is that? Near the convention center. There was, down the street, there was an attempt even there. If you read All the President's Men, there's a little piece that said that there was an attempt to do it in the Octagon Hotel. So, the orgies happened. Whether 2 little boys showed up, I don't know. Brett did. Yeah, the truth is, I was so uncool at 12. I didn't even know this happened until I was a senior in high school. I didn't. How I found out? You're going to love this, Kenny. Brumfield told me. The baseball coach just mentioned casually to me that he came to do the field early one day, and that's where I internalized this when I was 18 years old, and it came out here. He said that he went out to, in the car to do the field, and as he rounded the outer rims, edges of second base, he saw hippies screwing out in center field, and he stopped, and they didn't stop. And he was just perverted. He was just watching, and he thought these are lunatics, and he told me that at 18, and I kept that somehow. That's the closest that I came to that. 6 years later, the baseball coach mentioned it to me. So anyway, any questions? Also, this is really your night. It's I'm really here as a conduit to explore. I said to Mitchell and the people from Books and Books, I said, this is a book that you all wrote. I just happen to be there for it. But I really, anything you want to say, any questions about the book?
Are the Cosners your parents?
No. It's funny that you say this, Barbara. I should have said when I said, please don't embarrass me, I should have said, and please don't psychoanalyze me. Kenny Goldman, who's actually sitting up here, 20 years ago, he doesn't remember this, I'm sure, but he called me up. 2 things I can tell you to answer Barbara's question. One was Kenny Goldman, who was very close to my parents, very close. My parents adored him. And he called me up after he read the first book, and he said, "What? Where? How?" That's what he said. What? How? Where? Where did this? I never knew any. He said they had accents, but what? How? Where? Like how? What? How is this them? Right? As if to say there was no intimation other than they had accents. And the other thing that was funny is, I'm sure he's not here. I think he's a big-time heart surgeon somewhere else. John Shore. 20 years ago, Johnny Shore was here. And he came, it was at the other store, and he got up, and this is where I knew I was in trouble. He gets up, and his face is really red, and he's really mad. And he said, "I knew Mrs. Rosenbaum, and that woman is nothing like her. This is a terrible, terrible portrait." And I said, "John, it's a novel." "I don't care. She was lovely. You're a terrible son." So he moved away. But those were my 2 answers to Barbara. Look, years ago I was on an event somewhere, and someone said, "So do you hold yourself out to be a Jewish novelist?" And I said, I tried to be a sharecropper's son, but it didn't work when I tried to write. I just no perspective on that. So I said, I am clearly a Jewish novelist. And yeah, my parents were Holocaust survivors, but really nothing, all the terrible things that happened to the Posners, nothing. I live very much the life that Barbara Feshbach's brother Joey always says. He always says, no matter who he asks, Joey says the same thing. He says, nobody believes when I tell them they think, I said, it's a paradise. Nobody believes my childhood. Joey says this to everyone. He says, no one believes it. And he says it so convincingly that he got me convinced of it, that it was very much a paradise. It was really, it was a very small town, and the nightmares of these people, I mean, the Posners are damaged, but all of my parents in the books are damaged. All the protagonists are really screwed up. But I was okay here, sort of. I understand the inner world. I think I understand intuitively the inner world of the Holocaust survivors, and I have depicted the inner world. I haven't recreated my story because, years ago people said, people call me up, especially people who are children of Holocaust survivors, and they go, "Oh my God, I had a mother just like you," and I get offended at that because I say, "No, I didn't have that. Actually, by the way, not mother." And then I want to say, look, it's not memoir, it's fiction. Because if it was memoir, I'd sell more copies, believe me. I mean, my agent would love for this to have been true and call it a memoir. And I've never really, in every one of the books, certainly the ones that are set in Miami, there's a truth in it. There's a deep emotional truth, and there's some literal truth, some tiny literal truth. Like Brimfield told me that story. That's the literal truth. And then something else comes up, and I figured out a way to make that all happen. But no, I'm often psychoanalyzed because the books are they're funny, but they're also very painful. And you didn't get that in that piece. That's one of the reasons I didn't read you. I wanted you to go home happy. I actually wanted to sell a few of these, I give you the real texture of this thing. You go, who wants that? Barbara's always first. Yes, the other Barbara.
You stole my question.
What? Which is?
It's happy, it's funny, it's rich in detail. We remember these places and these people. Right. But the last line takes you down.
Yeah, my books
Tell me
end.
about that. Like,
All books, my last line are just awful.
Waiting for a Messiah who never comes.
Is that what it says? Oh, yeah.
Miami Messiah.
Yeah, it says all. Thank you, Barbara Brooks. Can I just say the third paragraph from the top is worse. No, the spoiler alert is the third paragraph from the that is worse, and I'm not going to read you that either. I don't know. Look,
Tonal thing. It's not a spoiler. It was a tonal thing.
look. I write. Miami fiction is known for thrillers about cocaine and cocaine cowboys. I don't do that. I'm a literary Miami Beach novelist. That's rare, I'm told. But the Miami novel is really much a tale of cocaine. Edna Buchanan-like. I don't do that. I write, serious fiction that everyone says is funny. I don't write them to be funny. I'm often surprised. Funny. I actually don't think that was the funniest scene in the book at all. There's much funnier stuff than that. That was just raunchy, but was necessary. It was an orgy, after all. But I think the laughter must come as a way. I know that one of the early reviews of the first book I wrote said the book alternates between pain and hilarity, and so I think there's truth to that. But I think Barbara Brooks, who's read all the books and knows the books really well, she's right. She's an amazingly gifted reader and writer, by the way. And she knows all the trapdoors, and she knows that there are moments in there you're going, whoa, that was hard. Yes. Oh, Lisa, so great seeing you. I'm so happy you're here.
I read Elijah Visible quite a while ago.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I read Elijah Visible quite a while ago.
The first
It was
book.
your first book.
Yeah.
How close is this story to Elijah Visible?
That's a good, excellent question. So Lisa Schwedel says, she says she read the first book, was Elijah Visible, was written 20 years ago, also featured the Posners, and how is it similar to that? It's really not. I resurrected the Posners, but in a different way, and I'll tell you how. If you read the first book, first book is very postmodern. There's 9 Adam Posners, and he lives in different locations, and he's in different ages, and he looks different in every one. And he's bald-haired, and sometimes he has long hair, and sometimes he's a motorcycle-wearing painter, and sometimes he's a college professor. And so he's in 9 different guises. And his parents, their names change, but in every chapter, his parents die. That's the only thing that completely ties all of the stories together. And it also goes in no linear order. So the last one, he's in kindergarten in New York City. That's how it ends. It ends with what you think is the beginning. It's very, Thane Rosenbaum goes postmodern. So it was like, it didn't go in any linear direction at all. But the reviews said, it said the book sucks, yeah, and then it said the best parts of the book were the 2 Miami Beach tales. And I really internalized that. I took that very seriously. I was surprised. It was repeated often enough. Adam Posner as a boy, observing the events around him with his parents, as opposed to Adam the adult, stumbling around New York and New Atlantic City and all the other places that he is, that it was more poignant watching him as a boy watching. And I took that seriously. I said, all right, well then, maybe I should try to bring the Posners back in a different way. And this way was to say, all right, well, what if instead of the Posners, and this is really answer to Lisa's question, instead of the Posners being the center of the story, what if the story was really about the city? Like the main character of the book is Miami Beach. Miami Beach stars in this book. It's a character. And the characters that live there. Lansky, Muhammad Ali, Gleason, of course, Sinatra, Isaac Bashevis Singer, which is bizarre to people when they think about that, the world's greatest living Yiddish writer was living, in Surfside, and really nobody but Linda Zilber knew. It's actually funny. Linda Zilber had him come to her house to do a reading, and Molly Lieblich, who is not from here, she's from New York, but she's lovely in here. When her parents actually had Pesach with Singer every year in Surfside. They had like a long years of history of Singer. This was before, in '72, he hadn't won the Nobel Prize. So he was really like a nobody. Only people who read Yiddish. He wasn't even really being translated into English yet. If you didn't read Yiddish, you wouldn't have known who he was. So these characters were here. They were all here in Miami Beach. So I said, well, what if the book is about them? It's about the characters and how the Posners are the conduits, the link, the connective tissue that makes all of them come together. All the characters know each other in the book because of the Posners. Sophie Posner becomes the consigliere for Meyer Lansky's mafia. She's good. She does the hits. She does everything. Jacob Posner becomes Isaac Singer's confidant. The way to tie them all together was to use the family. Adam is constantly trying to run away, so he's a runner, but he never gets very far, so that's metaphorical. So there's actually school desegregation. There's a whole chapter on that, because '72 also was the very first year where there was serious busing, both of the students and the teachers. Remember in Miami Beach, they started with the teachers. First, the teachers were bused. And actually in the story, I make fun of that, because that's ridiculous. Why would you bust they drove their own cars. But they were essentially forced to come to us, which is crazy. Like, why? That's ridiculous. So there's a whole chapter about the city that was so insular. It was a Jewish town, a small Jewish town. And all of a sudden, there were like African Americans at Nautilus Junior High School, and that was like, how did that happen? And then there's a huge Cuban piece to this. In fact, it's like one of my favorite things, the last chapter, where whether you believe it or not, Fidel Castro is in it. He's sort of in it or not in it. It's hard to say, but there's a Cuban piece, because all of this was happening at the small time. So I don't know, Lisa. It's not like the first book, because the first book really was about the family, and this is really about the city and these iconic characters.
So was your mother again?
Well, that people know. She was a tremendous gambler. I would go to school, and people like, Andy Kovler or Saul Simbler would show up the next day at Beach High and go, "We saw your mom at the track." And I used to go, "Lovely. Wonderful." Yeah, well, right, Rowena. Why would Andy know that? on a school night. On a school night. I saw your mom. So, yeah, she was a gambler. Terrible. But she went to Highlight. But, you know, she was not, to my knowledge, knew no gangsters. I did not know any gangsters growing up as uncles or godfathers. Yeah, Brett.
I don't have a question as much as comments. One is I've read 3 of your books, and one of the things I absolutely love is how you, in writing nonfiction, incorporate, in writing fiction, how you incorporate the truth or facts. And it's just, you know, having experienced all these things, it's amazing.
Thank you.
When I remember as a 12-year-old boy, 2 of my parents were civil liberties volunteer attorneys, and they were preparing for massive arrests for the conventions. And I went with them, and they had a whole trove of attorneys all waiting.
Yeah.
So to emphasize what a remarkable job Rocky Palmer's, who's the best police chief that Miami Beach ever had. You know, Vicky was one of our classmates.
Yeah.
And
In fact, I acknowledge Vicky. I acknowledge Jimmy in the book because I called Jimmy just to talk to me. You know, I just wanted to know. I wanted to know some things that I didn't know to put in, and.
like my parents never were called. They
Yeah.
were, you know, they're lining up, preparing for these troves of arrests that never happened.
You know, talk about filthy. Rocky Pomeranz had a great line. He actually, I put it in here because I think it happened. Nobody knows for sure. Even Jimmy doesn't know. When Abby Hoffman threatened to go naked with the hippies down Collins Avenue, Rocky Pomeranz purportedly said, "If you think you could walk naked in the middle of the day in August on Collins Avenue, I will lead the parade naked, and it won't be my baton that's sticking out." So I put that in the book. I don't know if he actually said it, but he kind of said it. But yeah, it was amazing. Remember, people don't remember, he wasn't the police chief much longer after that because he became famous. Because he was so famous for keeping the peace that he became a consultant, and he flew around the world helping other cities around the world how to do this. It's amazing when you think about these iconic images of 1968, which I certainly don't remember when I was 8, when, you know, Abe Rubakoff at the Democratic Convention famously called the Chicago Police Department Gestapo, right? And he said, the Gestapo tactics of the Chicago police, and then they would cut to the Lincoln Park or wherever they were, pounding on the heads of college co-eds. And the fact that that in Miami Beach, and also I found out, I think I put it in the book, there were only 200 cops. That's it. There weren't even cops. There weren't enough people, and he didn't bring anyone in extra. He figured out how to do it with 200. It's a really good, it's like the Cuban healthcare system. You know, he said, we don't have a lot, but we work it out. He had 200 people. He figured out how to use them efficiently, and it's an interesting anecdote. How are we doing? Yes, Bubba Cone.
Miami Beach also had the Playboy Plaza.
Yes, that's in here.
Well, Bubba, you were 30 then.
I was 20 years old, and in the summer of '72, I believe, they lowered the voting age to 18, and I got to vote in my first presidential election. And I voted for Hubert Humphrey, who at Miami-Dade that year, also FIU, started in the fall of '72.
Oh, I didn't know that one.
Yeah, which
Such an iconic
Casa
year.
Grande out on 24. I know I went there. Still have no credit in it.
But you were there.
Skipped, got numbers. By the third week, I was done. Okay, I got enough numbers for the entire quarter. But the other thing, I got drafted in '72. And I remember I was at Howie Whittle's house, and my sister called up Whittle's main number, put Stephen on the phone. I got drafted, went down to Coral Gables, right down the block from here. And you were talking about Cubans. Mario Stone rebuilt my knee a year and a half earlier. And of 200 people that went in to the draft registration that morning.
At the Gables High.
At not Gables High, some facility right here off Miracle Mile, like 195 got shipped out. I did.
Because of your
Got
knee.
shipped out, yeah, because of my knee.
He saved your knee.
Yeah, Mario was joking
Kept you out
with
of
me.
right.
And Mario, his son Caesar, went to Beach High. Mario was a Cuban freedom fighter in the Bay of Pigs invasion, and he would always talk about that to me after the surgery and the reading.
Well, those things are in the book. The mentioning of Alpha 66, which Saul obviously knows. The Cuban, the Cuban insurgents that were training in Homestead to take back the island is in the book. Anything else? Yes, Corey, yes.
No, I think that I did read the book already. I got it read. Very good. What I like is like seeing like a Mr. Kesselman pops up, and there's and there's a Bertman, and there's
Skip Bertman is in there, but he's not really Skip Bertman, and Michael Kesselman is really not Michael. I mean, he's really Coach Kuchalakis. Hey, but I gave it to Michael Kesselman instead. Yeah. I gave Michael Kesselman the gym teacher job because he really looked like he wanted to be one. Corey, yeah, it's good memory. There's a whole lot of that in the book. All right, it looks like people are we still have any questions? You want to cut it off? All right, thank you so much for coming out. There's food back there, courtesy of Bubba and Brett. Thank you all. Really, very loving of you all. Thank you
for coming. The books are for sale behind the counter on both sides. There's food on the other side. Thane will be signing on the other side of the store. So after you buy your book, send over there. If you're still watching online, give us a call. Thank you for coming.